So today we're going to sketch a graph given characteristics. So we have talked at this point about, or we've given you a graph, an equation, and we've asked you for the characteristics. Now we're going to give you some characteristics, and we're going to ask you to kind of sketch a graph of what could happen or what could look like. Some of these have multiple answers, so you will not have the same thing that the person next to you has. And some of them, everybody will have the same answer. So it just kind of depends on how the problem is set up and what they give us to work with in order to come up with the graph. So what I like to do is to go ahead and plot everything that we know, any points that we know. That's the easiest way to get started. So we know our vertex is 3, 4. So if we come over 3 and up 4, we know our vertex is there. We also have a y-intercept is 0, 5. So that's going to give us our point there. This tells us that it opens up. So we know that it's going to be in a U shape. Well, in order to be able to get a nice, accurate, sort of accurate graph, we should be able to also plot another point. We have this axis of symmetry because it goes to the vertex. We have this point over here, which is 0, 5. I know that I'm going to be able to mirror that point across the axis of symmetry. So I'm going to have the point over here 3 units away. If I can count 3 units. There we go. Away, so I'm going to have a graph that looks like this. There shouldn't be a whole lot of variation between the person next to you and your graph because given these points, everything has to pretty much line up on its own. Some things that we could ask you, maybe multiple choice. Given that information, I know my axis of symmetry has to be x equals 3. I know another point has to be 6, 5. I know that I have a positive a value. I know my end behavior is up, up. I know I have a minimum value. Minimum value is going to be 3. So a lot of different things that we can talk about. Domain's going to be all real numbers, negative infinity to infinity. My range is going to be from 4 to infinity, including that 4. So again, a lot of things that we could pull just by given that little bit of information. All I'm going to do with this is go ahead and pull some other things and kind of talk through some things that we can see. Looks like here we have a y-intercept of 0, 0. I have an axis of symmetry of x equals 2. So that's going to be a vertical line. I go through 2, so I'm going to go ahead and draw that dotted line in. And we also know that it opens down. Well, in this case, since this is the point 0, 0, I know I'm 2 away from the line of symmetry, so I'm going to be able to plot a point over here as well. So I know that point has to exist on my graph. If it opens down, I know there's going to be an upside down U. I also know that my vertex has to lie on this axis of symmetry. It doesn't tell me where it has to lie. So this is where you could be different from the person next to you. So maybe it's way up here. Even though it's way up here, I know it's got to go through this point and this point down here. So I can draw in a nice sketch of that curve. Now, somebody could have said, well, I don't think it goes through that. Maybe it goes through this point down here. So in the brown marker here, theirs would look something like this. And both of these answers would be correct because both of them are going to satisfy this information. What wouldn't satisfy this information would be maybe if I drop this below the x-axis. So maybe what happens if I put my point, my vertex there, and then to draw it through these points here. Here, this red one would not be a solution because it doesn't open down. So I know that one would be incorrect. So anything where we have a vertex above the x-axis would be an acceptable value, especially make sure that we go through those 2 points that we know. So a question that could be asked, multiple choice, what do we know about the vertex? Well, the vertex would have to be greater than 0, wouldn't it? So we know that it wouldn't be able to be less than 0. So again, some things that we could ask about a graph given this information. Here we have a vertex at -1, -2. So I can go ahead and graph that, -1, -2. There's my point. I have no y-intercept. So I know that I'm not going to go through the y-axis. Well, what does that tell me about the graph? Well, that tells me that it's going to go in this direction. So I've got a sideways parabola. It doesn't tell me anything else about that besides I have that vertex. So I know that I have to go through that, or I have to have that axis of symmetry there. So I can go ahead and plot a point. It doesn't tell me anything about it except for that negative coefficient, which we know then it's going to have to be either a regular parabola where we go up 1 and over 1 in both directions, or tighter. So we can go ahead then and maybe make it a value of -2, in which case it would be coming up or over 1 and up 2. That would give us an a value that was much less than -1, wouldn't it? Go ahead and plot my 2 points, and there's going to be a nice graph. Again, I know it's not going to open up or down. I know it's not going to open to the right, because I know it's got to open up to the left because of that coefficient and being no y-intercepts. Just maybe a side note here. Maybe the leading coefficient, if I said it was less than, it was between -1, a, and then less than 0. So what would that mean? Remember, if we have a fractional value there, that a value, that would make a very wide u. So maybe that would come over, we could come up as much as we want, and then over, so we make maybe a wide value there. And that would be an example of something between -1 and 0. Here we have one more example. Here we're going to give you a domain as 2 to infinity and an x-intercept of 5, 0. So here we're going to go 5, 0 as a point. Our domain is from 2 to infinity, so all my x values have to be larger than 2. So here's my 2 in here. I guess I probably should have made that inclusive 2. Otherwise, it's going to make it kind of difficult to draw there. So if that's an x-intercept, domain is 2 to infinity, I know I can't have anything to the left of that line because it would be in my domain. So I could put that vertex anywhere on this graph that I want. Maybe we'll make it here. Again, that's arbitrary. So if I make this point here, I'd have my axis of symmetry going through. I could go ahead and plot another point and then draw in my graph. And that would be an acceptable graph there. Likewise, maybe I had my point down here. Again, that would give us a domain larger than 2. I can go through that x-intercept of 5, 0. I here have an axis of symmetry. And I can come down 4 here, if I can do it correctly. Looks about right. And I can draw in my graph there. So again, those would be 2 acceptable graphs. There's an infinite number of acceptable graphs that would satisfy this information. But what we're looking for is what could happen. So if I said, could the graph have an axis of symmetry of x equals -4. Well, would that make sense? Well, x equals -4 would be going up and down. There's no way we can make this graph with this information have an axis of symmetry at -4. So maybe that would be a false. But maybe 2, we say, could have axis of symmetry of y equals -3. And it could have that, couldn't it? We could draw our y equals -3 goes through there. We could definitely draw in a graph that would go sideways and give us that form. So that would maybe be a true. And then maybe a 3. I'm just, again, making these up as I go. Maybe could have another point of, let's say, 1, 1, 3. I don't know. So here, if we have 1, 3, 1, 3, so again, no way that we could make that graph come out to touch that value because our domain is saying 2 to infinity. So it would have to definitely be larger than 2 in order for that to be true. So that would be a false. So in this case, only 2 there would be true. And that's kind of the question in my mind that we could ask for this type of questions. And that gives you an idea of being able to sketch a graph and then also kind of a multiple choice extended response question on what we would ask. Good luck.